Rahul Reddy. We are here to present about the national interest waiver. What are the things that you need to know if you want to be applying for the national interest waiver? Along with me is my business partner, Rebecca Chen. Rebecca Chen has been associated with Reddy Neumann PC from past 13, 14 years. And before that, she has vast experience before she joined our office in the immigration field. Rebecca, can you explain me briefly what is national interest waiver?
Sure. So the waiver part of the national interest waiver is actually a waiver of the labor certification, which people might be aware is the first step usually in the employment-based green card process. So the point of the perm labor certification is to prove that there are no U.S. workers that are willing and qualified for the job that the foreign national is performing. The point of the national interest waiver is to basically skip that whole perm labor certification process by proving to USCIS that the foreign national's work is of such importance that they should be allowed to kind of skip over the whole perm process. And so the NIW case is very much focused on the applicant's work, what they are going to be doing in the U.S. and how it will benefit the U.S. and therefore why they should be able to skip the perm process.
What are the general requirements of the national interest waiver? Because the word sounds very intimidating to me.
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind is it's in the EB2 category. So anyone looking into the NIW first needs to have the qualifications for EB2, which is an advanced degree, like a master's degree or higher, or a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of relevant work experience is also the equivalent to a master's degree for EB2 purposes. Or there are some categories for exceptional ability, which have kind of different criteria, but those are kind of the main categories to qualify. Then on top of that, if you meet that minimum threshold for EB2, then there are kind of three main criteria to the national interest waiver. First, you have to show that your proposed endeavor, basically what you are going to be doing in the U.S., has both substantial merit and national importance. That's the first requirement. The second requirement is that you, the applicant, are well positioned to advance that proposed endeavor. And then kind of the third requirement is that generally on balance, it is beneficial to the United States to waive the labor certification requirement, basically to waive that and waive the job offer requirement for whatever reason that, your work is of an urgent nature. It is something that is crucial to the U.S. right now. And so, there's no time to go through the perm labor certification or it's going to create jobs in the U.S., something like that. So the labor perm process should be waived. So those are kind of the three main criteria in addition to the beneficiary's personal qualifications of, education or experience.
Let's assume that I do have all the educational requirement of master's degree. And I work for a Pfizer company. And even though I'm a software programmer, Pfizer company, as you know, Rebecca, is the one that has done the COVID vaccine. It's of utmost importance to the entire world. Can I get the national interest waiver because my company does the COVID vaccine? Or do I have to be involved in the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, so like I said, the proposed endeavor is kind of a crucial part. Defining your proposed endeavor in the U.S. is sort of a crucial part of the NIW process. It's not really enough that just your employer is doing something that benefits the United States. Generally, you need to show how your work is going to directly kind of advance that benefit to the U.S. So someone working for Pfizer, of course, if there's someone working for Pfizer who was working on developing the vaccine, that sort of thing, that is, of course, going to go toward national interest and be eligible for the waiver. Someone who is just a receptionist at Pfizer, or even just doing kind of routine IT work at Pfizer, if their work can't be linked directly to kind of the national benefit, it may not qualify.
Can you provide me some of the examples which typically may qualify for national interest?
Sure. So a lot of people in the oil and gas industry apply for national interest waivers, of course, because you can show that the U.S. energy sector is an area of great national importance. The U.S.'s energy independence. And so engineers who work in oil production or who work in ways that advance kind of productivity, efficiency of U.S. oil production. Those types of jobs are good candidates for NIWs. Anything in the medical field that is, so there is a different category for physician national interest waivers. That's sort of a separate category, but for physicians who are engaged in critical research for diseases that are shown to be of national importance or national significance, those are good candidates. And then anything where you can show that you will be creating a business that will create U.S. jobs, that will create jobs in the U.S. If you are an entrepreneur and you have a plan to start your own business, even if the business itself isn't really tied that closely to some sort of national security or national health or safety situation, if you can show that it's going to impact job creation pretty significantly, then that could also qualify.
What kind of evidence do you have to present for all these endeavors that the people need to prove? Do we need like experience letters, article publication? What kind of evidence do you normally show, Rebecca?
Yeah, so it will, of course, depend on the proposed endeavor and that particular job in that industry. For example, if you are an entrepreneur and you are basing your national interest waiver argument on job creation, then the business plan is going to be a very crucial piece of evidence. If your business isn't off the ground yet, you need to be able to show a pretty detailed business plan that shows the jobs that will be created. For any NIW application, I would say recommendation letters or reference letters from experts in the field are going to be crucial. That's going to be pretty consistent across the board because whatever your proposed endeavor is, whatever your field is, it's not something that the USCIS officer is going to be an expert in. And so for the USCIS officer to understand why your work has substantial merit and is of national importance, it requires experts in the field to be able to attest that the work that you are doing is important, will benefit the United States interests. So those are pretty important, usually at least 3 to 4, and not just from people you currently work with. It's always easy to get letters from your managers or colleagues, but actually, if a good portion of those letters are from independent experts in the field who are aware of your work, don't necessarily work directly with you, but are aware of your work and can speak to the importance of your work, that is a strong factor. And then as far as publication, so it depends on, again, the fields, the endeavor. The publications and scholarly articles, those sorts of things can go toward that second criteria of being well positioned. If you're working in a kind of cutting edge field and your research is something that is going to benefit the United States, having publications of that research showing that you've presented it at industry conferences, of course, that's going to help. But it doesn't have to be publications. It could be a patent, for example. If you're an engineer and have developed something and gotten something patented, that would also be a strong piece of evidence.
Does we need employer to apply? Because most of the employment-based requires employer to apply the I-140 or immigration application, or can the individual apply in the national interest waiver?
Yes, so that is another big advantage of the NIW, is that it is one of the few employment-based green card categories that allows for self-petitioning, meaning the individual, the foreign national, can submit the I-140 application themselves. They don't need employer sponsorship to be able to file the application. They may still need letters from, from coworkers or a manager that attests to the work that they are doing, but they don't necessarily need the company or employer to sponsor them, which is also helpful in the case of potential job loss, or not even job loss. If you are considering moving employers, having a self-petitioned I-140 approval in the NIW category is helpful, because then your I-140 isn't tied to the job offer from that one company.
So, Rebecca, you're saying that national interest waiver is in EB2 category. I mean, we can go through the labor certification or we can go to self-employment. Tell me some of the scenarios where national interest waiver is more advantageous than going through the EB2 I-140 application.
Yeah, so in addition to being able to self-petition, not being tied to a particular job offer, it can also save a lot of time, especially now that there's premium processing available this year for kind of the first time for national interest waiver applications. It was available to a limited extent this past year, but starting this year, all NIW applications are eligible for premium processing. It's not the 15-day premium processing turnaround that we're used to for most cases. It's 45 days, but it's still a huge improvement on the 1 year plus processing time that it used to be for NIW applications. And so we have looked at the NIW more and more actually in the past couple of years because of the length of the perm processing times. So because it is still an EB2 category, it may not seem that attractive to Indian nationals or Chinese nationals because you still have a backlog in EB2. But if you are in a situation where you are coming up on your 6-year limit for H-1B status, you don't have an I-140 approval yet, maybe your company is won't sponsor, or they're in the process of working on the perm, but it's not going to get approved in time just because of the length of the perm processing times. If your work qualifies for the NIW, this may be a good backup for you to petition on your own, or the company can help you to try to get an I-140 approval faster before the 6-year limit.
Rebecca, can you cite some of the recent NIW applications that have been successful from your desk?
Yeah, so we have gotten an approval recently for a pediatric hematologist/oncologist, so a physician who is doing research on fighting blood diseases and cancer, and we were able to submit documentation. Of course, in general, cancer is a bad thing, but the more that you can tie your cases to national initiatives, federally funded programs, that's always going to be a strong case for the national importance. So, of course, under the Biden administration, there's the cancer moonshot that they have funded. So, tying any research work in the cancer field to that was what we did in that case. We have filed applications for production engineers in the oil and gas field, like I mentioned, a research engineer, kind of also in the energy field, but sort of on the other side, on the sustainable energy side, a research engineer who has a PhD in chemical engineering, who is doing work on basically developing batteries that would be kind of a source of clean, sustainable energy. We have filed an NIW for that. So those are some of the examples.
Especially you're citing, Rebecca, and I want to elaborate on the national interest waiver, is that especially there are some employers who are not willing to file the labor certification on I-140. So if they are not willing to, if you're qualified by national interest, you can file for the national interest waiver, get an I-140 approval, and you can extend the H-1B by yourself. And especially if you are not an Indian national or Chinese national, your priority date may be current, and you can file a 485 application without any help from your employer if you qualify for the national interest waiver. Especially since we are located in Houston, we do work with a lot of oil and gas people whose employers are not willing to file the labor and I-140. They can come and see if they will be qualified for the national interest waiver. Rebecca, how do we contact? If somebody wants to contact you, what do they need to do?
Yeah, they can go to our website. It's scrolling at kind of the bottom of this page, www.rnlawgroup.com, and you can see the consultation page from there to schedule a consultation. It is, if you are going to schedule a consultation with an attorney to look into a potential NIW case, it's always a good idea to have your CV updated. Make sure your CV is detailed and up to date before the consultation, and to send it in prior to that so that the attorney can review it and make a good assessment. It will also require discussion, of course, during the consultation to figure out the endeavor and make sure it is a good case, but that's something that you can do beforehand. Make sure you have an up-to-date, detailed CV.
Typically, what's the time process, Rebecca? If I come to you, okay, Rebecca, I think so, I may be eligible, I discuss. We both think so that, I'm eligible for it and I want to apply for the green card. And you told me that the I-140 will take approximately around 5 weeks or so to get it approved in the premium processing. But how long does the process of filing the application take from your desk?
Yeah, so because the NIW is so focused on the employee and their work, the beneficiary, the applicant, needs to be prepared to kind of do a lot of legwork. It's your job as the applicant to educate the attorney on your field of work, why it's important, how it will help the U.S., so that the attorney can then make the case to USCIS. So the preparation time for an NIW really varies depending on the applicant. And
let's say I'm a very cooperative client.
Yeah, if they are able to get all the documentation needed, then it can be prepared in, I would say, 1 month is probably the fastest for preparation of an NIW case. It also requires kind of independent research on, the statistics in the fields, the industry. So it takes longer than a normal I-140 that's just based on a perm application, because that I-140 can just be filed immediately based on the perm approval. An I-140 for the NIW is going to take longer to research and prepare to make a strong case, but the applicant can decrease that time by considering beforehand who are the people that they could ask for recommendation letters. Part of it is a little bit out of the applicant's control also. I would say we spend a lot of time kind of waiting for authors of the letters to kind of get back to the applicant. A lot of times there's back and forth on the letters. The wording in the letters is very important. It's important that applicants don't just go and send a template to their proposed letter writer without having it reviewed by an attorney, because there's very particular language and information that needs to be in those letters. And so make sure you work pretty closely with the attorney to make sure the letter content is what it needs to be for the petition before sending it to the authors.
So typically, if somebody wants a recommendation letter, you recommend that wait, speak with the lawyer, make sure that, you give the proper advice to the person who's drafting, who's giving you the letter, rather than just get any random letter before taking an advice from the lawyer.
Yeah, it's really a collaboration. So some applicants come to us and we'll expect the attorney to just write the letter entirely and send it to them. We can't write the letter entirely because we are not experts in your field. We can't attest to what the field is like, what your work is like. So part of it is going to be, of course, you and the letter writer attesting to their qualifications in the field, how they are an expert, what their qualifications are, then how they know you, how they're aware of your work, and then stating whether you are well positioned to advance this endeavor, how it's going to help the U.S. And so the attorney can help kind of structure the letter that way, but we can't, of course, write the content of the letter, because that will kind of be up to you and the author to provide those industry-specific details.
Rebecca, did I leave anything else that you want to address?
No, I don't think so.
But if anybody wants to consult for National Interest Waiver, Rebecca Chen is the proper person in our office. I'll give a link where you can make an appointment, but as you suggested, if you are making an appointment with her, please update your resume or CV and then speak with her. It'll be much easier if you can put the things forward to her, why it's in the national interest. It'll be easier for her to determine whether you're going to fit into it. It'll be then you can decide to proceed with us. But it definitely is very useful when the employer is not filing for the labor and I-140. It really becomes very useful. Also, sometimes, as Rebecca has pointed out, the process for the I-140 can be as less as 2 to 3 months for you to get an I-140 approval, as compared to the labor certification process, which is about 1.5 to 2.5 years. If the employer is willing to file. In this case, even if the employer is not willing to file, you can file yourself and you will control the destination. And when the time comes for filing the green card, that is adjustment of status application, you don't have to wait for instructions from your employer. You can file by yourself the adjustment of status. You don't need anything called I-485J to be signed by your employer. You can just file the 485 by yourself. Anything else, Rebecca, before we close?
No, thank you.